Hello and welcome to Crystal Core Radio. I'm your host, Brian, joining me in my co-host position, Chris, and welcoming technically for the first time as our first collab ever basically turned into a mini podcast. The number one feedback we got was, this should have been a podcast, or could you make it longer? We're happy to welcome Lukron back onto the channel. Dude, it's been too long. We've been constantly in contact, namely because we've been checking in on your story progression. Today's podcast not going to be a spoilery, but we will get some thoughts on Endwalker. We're going to get some, just updates on what Lucron has been up to. But before I kind of just make a longer than necessary intro, Lucron, why don't you introduce yourself to those who don't know you and should be following you?
I am that one guy who made that one first impressions video that kind of blew up before the whole giant freaking WoW exodus that started happening for some reason. Well, actually, I know the reason, but yeah, I'm that guy, and I also made like one other video, first impressions, and then I just kind of took a long time doing a really slowly done MSQ playthrough of Shadowbringers. I mostly spend a lot of time in the editor trying to make it like as brushed up as I can. And I do little fancy intros and outros for those. So if you don't really actually care much for the playthroughs, I do have little bits there. Yeah. Hi, I'm Lukron.
Hey, Lucron. We go in to say some thanks to for people supporting the podcast itself. So guys, if you are over here on Ginger Gaming Radio, Vern, WG Productions, and Keelan have joined the Podcast Legends, and they are helping to fund the show, as well as Luke for his generous donation, helping to cover the cost of the podcast, hosting, and so much more. So thank you guys, making this a reality and a possibility. But all of the thanks being aside, today's show is going to be focusing on a couple things. I want to talk with Lucron. We want to get some updated thoughts, about his Shadowbringers experience. Obviously he was a part of this earlier wave. He was, I guess you could call him a pioneer. And in terms of his editing of videos, if you guys aren't following his channel, his link is in the description of these videos, of these podcasts. Be sure to go give him a follow. You will find something incredible over there with his content. I really have been enjoying watching it. But beyond that plug, Lucron, how have you been, man? Like, where are you currently in the story without spoiling it?
I'm somewhere in, I think, midway through the level 79 segment, roughly, of Shadowbringers. I don't know how much else I can say about that without spoiling, because I am kind of intense about that.
So you're almost done with 5.0, and then you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, yeah, I do have different plans for when I get to those, because right now with this current method of recording I'm doing, I am keeping roughly in pace with my YouTube progress in terms of my actual in-game progress. So I'm not recording way ahead, like super far ahead, in order for me to accumulate a backlog to edit through later. That is what I should be doing. But what I am doing now is a little bit more masochistic, being that I'm very, how can I explain it? It's kind of like I'm trying to figure out what outside life is like by swimming to the middle of the ocean and living on an island, just to figure out what it's like being outside. So I kind of took it to the extreme a bit, in being that I've strongly secluded myself from a lot of things, like especially the Final Fantasy XIV community, for the sake of being anti-spoilers. So this whole time, while I'm taking my sweet freaking slow time trying to get through this MSQ and then editing this stuff during these quote-unquote breaks, I'm not really taking a break. I'm just sitting there trying to edit these videos for way longer than necessary. I'm just sitting there usually very secluded off. Like if I am in game, I'm off by some mining node or some tree. Like I've been heavily deforesting some lands for some time for the sake of guild making, I guess. But that's usually what most of my gameplay is like nowadays, just sitting that off half AFK, alt tabbed for a good portion of the day, and just editing on the side and trying to expedite that as much as I can. But I say that, but my perfectionist side of me keeps kicking in, and I keep taking way longer than I want to, essentially. So with that said, that means I don't really know a whole lot of the Final Fantasy XIV community in general. Like, you folks are like I think the only people I've ever interacted with in terms of the content creator side of things.
And he's come back.
That works to our advantage.
Yeah.
We're wonderful. Don't meet anyone else. They're definitely not better than us.
No. Oh.
Half truths and lies. Half truths and lies. I tell you. Oh man, that is so fascinating. You're like this, like almost like this unspoiled like environment, like from a scientist perspective. Like we've discovered this island where everything has evolved differently, and you have no knowledge of like all of this other stuff. You're oh my gosh, you're perfect. Guys, we found him.
I am living in an uncontrolled environment, and anyone peering through, they just see like a gremlin out in the woods. I'm just like, just looking back at him.
That's freaking hilarious.
But you should be able to catch up in Endwalker, though. You should be like Endwalker won't last long enough that you can't catch up. That's going to be a big change.
I hope to be able to catch up to the MSQ by Endwalker at least dropping, because there's a lot of things I wanted to do in Shadowbringers, but considering the pace I'm going now, I may not experience anything that Shadowbringers like end game at all has to offer because of how freaking slow it is. And I've been doing this for, what was it? I think it's 9 months, 10 months, basically a year of me living this way. And even on the YouTube side of things, I don't watch Final Fantasy 14 content on YouTube because I know how hectic and insane the YouTube recommendation bots are. Mm-hmm. Yep. And some people put in some spoilers in the thumbnails and or the titles, and because of that precaution is a rather huge factor as to my feeling of seclusion from the Final Fantasy 14 community, because I do like consuming content in the game that I enjoy, but because I know how spoilers are and because of the nature of MMO and everyone's at the end goal and I'm sitting there just crawling through the whole race there, I'm kind of not been able to really see what people's been really up to as much as I would like. But I do plan to change that whole process of things after 5.0 is finished, because once I get done with 5.0, then I'll probably do that other method of keeping on playing all the way to the end before focusing hard on the YouTube videos, so that way I can actually enjoy the game with everyone else, because I have missed a lot of opportunities playing the way I have.
It's interesting. How long does it take you right now, would you say, to release one of your videos?
Roughly a week if I'm doing pretty all right with speed, but every now and then it's a little over a week, and sometimes 2 weeks. But the last time that happened, fortunately, was when I decided to write a custom piece of music for the intro, and decided to go a little ham on that. Considering the last time I wrote a piece of music took me before that was like 6 months, and I did that within a week. No. Yeah, it was roughly like half a week. I feel kind of proud of that because holy heck, that's a huge jump in speed. But yeah, hopefully they only take like a week at a time. And I do want to get it to 2 weeks. No, not 2 weeks. 2 uploads a week. But I've been trying for that for so long, and I have not been able to do that.
My God.
One day.
Now, Chris, you've had some experience with spoiling things in titles and thumbnails. Do you want to weigh in on some of the lessons that we've learned over the course of our time on YouTube?
Yeah, there was so we were putting out day one guides. I played the game for all of the brilliant content that exists outside of the story, which is actually the majority of our playtime, but is not the majority of what the community focuses on. And so as a result, I enjoyed making content for the community. So we would make day one guides, but day one guides, Brian and I would wake up and wait for the servers to go live. So we're up at some freakish hour. We would play the content like 3 or 4 2 times through while in voice chat with each other, so we could kind of make sure that we're making call outs and stuff so that we're getting as much vision as possible. So I'd be a tank, he'd be a healer. So we get instant queue times, and we have 2 very different but valid viewpoints of the content. And then we would divide it up. And so like I got a trial fight, Fluminous, I think is the name. And then we go into the editing booth, and basically I chop the video up into all of its mechanics in order that we called out. And then I record a voiceover in real time. I play it, and that takes me a couple of playthroughs to get it right without any hiccups. I don't have time for a script. And then I export it and I generate the thumbnail. I pre-write the descriptions, the tags, and all that in a text document because I don't yet have that up on the YouTube side. So that as soon as it's done exporting, I upload it, copy paste, upload the thumbnail, push it, and then I go to work. And so that was all happening so that I could be at work on time in the mornings. So it's very, very, very rapid. And that's so that people that want to run it on day one but hate running things blind have a guide out there. And we regularly got thank yous for those. Whoa. I, at the time, didn't see the difference between naming something after a boss or naming it after the instance name. And there's a reason that the instance names are the way they are. The instance names are incredibly vague. Fluminous means nothing. It's a made-up word. The boss inside of Fluminous does matter. And so we got a wave of hate. Because the other thing I did is I grabbed the boss image to put in the thumbnail because it's a sweet looking boss. And I was like, well, people are going to want to know what they're looking for. So I just threw that up. So everybody's notifications went out and they got told who the boss was and shown the boss. Now, for me
without
personally,
even clicking on the video,
without even clicking, that was just in people's feeds. Now, at the time, Brian and I were publishing anywhere between 2 and 5 times a day. And so because of the way the YouTube algorithm works, if you can maintain a production schedule of 5 times a day, and it's not just total garbage going out, once somebody watches one of your videos one time, whether or not they subscribe, the algorithm, how it worked then, it's an ever-changing thing, but the algorithm, how it worked then would be like, hey, you like this person's videos? Do you like all of their videos? And so there were people who said, like, I watched one of your videos one time, and then you're like 18 out of my top 20 videos being shown in my home screen. Like, what the heck? Like, you guys are fine. I don't want that much of Brian and Chris, which is one of the many reasons we split into multiple channels so that people have more control over what aspects of what we publish they get attached to because of the way the algorithm works. So it's let us kind of section it. So they're like, I don't care about Genshin Impact or WoW. Like, I just want 14. Great. We have a way that you can subscribe to just that because we now have underneath our umbrella like 9 or 10 YouTube channels.
Yes.
So just divvied it up.
Yeah. All these new people coming over from Twitch, being on the YouTube train. It's like, yeah, you were a pioneer. We were a pioneer. Nobody gives us credit. No respect at all.
And so I did accidentally spoil a boss. I fixed it. We replaced the thumbnail, replaced the title.
Learned a lesson. Yeah.
Learned a lesson. Pinned an apology at the top of the comments for all the people that, so that all the comments that are like, I still saw it this way, I'm aware. And then like the best apology is not to like stop and dwell on it. The best apology is to acknowledge it, clarify to make sure you understand how you correct it, and then just don't do it again. Like, that's the best apology in my opinion. So you just fix it. And so from that point forward, we always use quest names or instance names that they are revealing like in the live letter, in the patch notes, because this is pre-screened by Final Fantasy. And so we just trust Yoshi and his team to not make something too spoilery. And they spoiled it. So we'll just copy them. And then what I was trying to avoid is I didn't want my thumbnail to look like everybody else's because everybody else is using the art revealed in the patch notes. And so that became the harder part, is how do you handle a thumbnail so that it is on theme, but is not revealing. And so that is where you end up just using cool concept art for a related zone or something like that. And then like, that's the hardest part, is because you do want to show the boss, but you can't show the boss because the boss is all that really matters. So every once in a while I get like a good screenshot of the arena or something, or I get something that like in my mind still keeps it like the arena isn't spoilery until you already know what it is. If you haven't seen it, you don't know what you're looking at. So like, I don't know. That's the harder part.
Yeah, we've seen that feedback coming from time to time. It's like, oh, you showed the boss in the actual footage.
I can't honor. I can't.
Well, no, yeah, but I like, literally
like, can't you make a guide without the boss in the footage?
You could,
but
but then you'd be like Lukron 2 weeks later when nobody needs it.
Comes out 15 weeks later. But yes, June Bob makes guides without the boss. They're fully.
Animated. I mean, I'm a bit of a visual learner, and if I'm going to go learn like a boss fight, I do want to see what it is, because if I don't actually like see what's going on, like I understand that point, but it is an interesting thing to think about in terms of like thumbnail conventions. If you're making a guide, because if it's all about the boss, then it makes sense to have the boss in there. But me, it's weird because in World of Warcraft, I didn't think this was nearly as big of an issue because I don't think I know there's people believe the people get really interested in World of Warcraft story. I was as well. For me personally, I thought it ended at Legion. If you ask me, everything afterwards just kind of felt like a fan fiction. But I was really invested in the story up until that point. And I don't really recall seeing a whole lot of people in the raid guides in terms of comments. I didn't notice hardly any of them really talking about spoilers being a huge deal, but it is very much a huge deal here, probably because of how strongly established and connected all the story is in this game. I've noticed there are a lot of strings that are attached to places that surprise me to this day. Like in World of Warcraft, I kind of got used to just being able to just kind of stop caring about a character because the dev team would stop caring about the character because then they wouldn't have too much progression afterwards. Here it seems like everyone seems to have a decently fair like show and their own little story. So it is interesting to hear all the difficulties in terms of regarding that. Now, as for the footage stuff, I'm kind of with you. If you're going to look for a guide about a boss fight, I would prefer.
So the person I picture for a normal piece of content, for Savage, I want a guide before I go in because I don't want to waste anybody else's time. I'm not in a world first group. But for non-Savage, they actually make the content largely teach it to you. So I kind of want to experience it blind. But imagine that Brian and I are running it blind and we just run into a wall. We don't, especially early in an expansion, we don't have the gear. We don't know what we're doing. I don't have time to sit here and prog this. There's a mechanic that we don't know what it's doing. I want to go look up at the guide at that point. So I picture somebody who went in blind, ran into a wall, the group disbanded, and then they don't want to have that experience again. So they go out to Google. What are they going to type in? They're going to type in the boss name. They're going to be looking for the boss name in the thumbnail. So that's how I got to that conclusion, is I assumed I was talking to somebody that in many cases has already seen the boss. And so I don't want to hide from that person. But at the same time, my title and my thumbnail are public. And so I don't also want to reveal that. So how do you do that when it comes to MSQ? Because somebody who wants to see the reaction to a particular piece of MSQ, that was really meaningful to me. Lukron's making all this stuff. Maybe I don't have time to watch his entire playthrough of MSQ because that is as long as MSQ. But how do I go catch the moment that meant a lot to me? I want to see what Lucron did with that one moment. How do you handle titles, descriptions, thumbnails so they're not spoilery, but so that somebody who knows has the ability to go back and kind of find something in your content?
Well, I feel like I'm not really the greatest person in terms of overall identifiers because my titles are rather vague unless they actually get to a dungeon or a trial, because I just flat out just put out that name at the beginning. But in terms of everything else during the story, I have some type of one word description of these things. Like I remember one being vigor, another being a loyalty and whatnot. And it's basically a one word synopsis of the overall vibe of the story in that particular segment. And yes, I do end up having to look up quite a few synonyms and definitions because I'm not smart enough to come up with all these myself, on the spot. But even me personally, I still don't really remember the names of some of my videos. So, and I did read someone's comment mentioning I should probably put numbers on them so I can so they can identify where that is in the overall playthrough. And I really should get to that. But in terms of the big moments, in terms of the thumbnails, when it didn't include the trials and the dungeons, well, actually, even the dungeons were kind of a little bit on the vague side. I tried to make sure not to include any of the main characters. I tried to keep all the main characters excluded, and I only include the side characters. I don't think that's the best thumbnail thing because people will see them and they're like, what's this? And that's kind of the point. Because if you don't remember or what this was, then good. Because if you recognize them from somewhere earlier and you're not there in the MSQ yet, if you recognize them, that could be spoilery. Because my particular instance with the Shadowbringers trailer, when I watched that back when I was level 28, 30 in The Realm Reborn, there's a lot of big plot moments that kind of got strongly nullified all the way even through the end of Stormblood. there is a whole bunch of things that were just kind of a little ruined for me because I saw that trailer, which is why I'm also a big advocate of not watching like the future expansion trailers until you actually complete the whole MSQ of that expansion. So with that said, that also means I have not seen the Endwalker trailer out of concern that I'll see people. Yeah.
So what's the threshold? So like, let's keep it to some early ARR characters so that anybody with like 2 hours of playtime isn't shocked by this. Like, let's say that we have like a disheveled traveler, like an NPC who doesn't even get a name. And then we have like Bateron or one of these like adventure guild type quest givers that you see a lot. And then right very early on, but they're not like with you. And then you have like one of the scions so like, you're not going to put one of the scions in your thumbnail. Clearly you would put the NPC, but like, where's the threshold? Like, are quest givers that we see more than one time, but don't ever like go with us early on? Like how, where's the threshold there?
I try to include whoever's kind of new, like someone who's introduced and someone new in the story and the pace of things. I try not to repeat them too often. Actually, I don't think I've ever repeated someone in the thumbnail. Now I think about it. Yeah, just about everyone that's kind of new that props up in the story. I kind of have them be the focus instead of the main character because there are some plot points that could be ruined if you include the main character after certain thresholds. Like early on in A Realm Reborn, though, I do think it's all right to include the main characters of the story because you haven't had a lot of time to establish them. But in particular, like keeping up with the someone new concept, like when you first see the scions, when you first get introduced to them, you can just put them in the thumbnail because it's the first time you see them. Like to your knowledge, they're new. You don't see like this is the first time
you don't know they're
them.
important, but as they become important, they become off limits. But they wouldn't matter because you're not repeating them anyway.
Yeah, basically just include whoever's new. And in terms of trials, I haven't done the best job with that now that I think about it. That is a tricky one. That is a tricky one. Yeah,
It's
I might
tough.
need to rethink my. Yeah. I'm feeling your.
It matters less because you're doing it years in the future. But like we were doing it day and date, so there's people who haven't even updated their client, and I've already put a thumbnail on their face. So like, you making the exact same thumbnail when you get to Flip Minutes that I made is very different. You doing it now.
That's true.
Me doing it day and date.
I still want to kind of prepare for the like on the off chance I am actually on time with things. I would like to be able to be in the mindset of making non-spoiler thumbnails. And now that I think about the trials, that is definitely something I'm going to have to think about and how
it's
I'm
tough.
going to.
WoW does a better job, right? Because like Iceground Citadel is beautiful on its own without showing up.
Yes.
So the fact that it's okay to spoil in WoW, you can just put Denathrius right on the thumbnail for Castle Nathria. That's insanely spoilery. That is the final boss. We've already met them in the story leading up to then. And like, you don't know that they're a villain when you meet them. And they are the final boss of Nathria. And the WoW community, by and large, does not give two craps. And they call it Denathrius. Like, they don't care. And yet, like, you could have put Castle Nathria as your thumbnail and numbered the boss, final boss. In 14, it would have been given an encounter name. And so, maybe it would have been, the final Lord or something like that, or Lord of Nathria. And you wouldn't have known that it's Denathrius nowhere within this huge reveal moment. But it doesn't matter. Like, so it's ironic that WoW has a more cinematic location as opposed to 14. They're always like these round arenas. We don't ever like see ourselves like walking into them with very rare, like Orbon Monastery is one that jumps out to me as one that they gave us a lot of artwork. It was really beautiful that set a tone prior to stepping inside. But for a lot of these trial fights, like when you think about the fights in Shadowbringers or Stormblood, those trial fights, I don't think of any iconic location image, geographic image that I could use instead of the boss image. You just kind of like do the quest, talk to the blue glowy thing, and in you go.
That's true. That is quite true. It is very much more character based and not like where it's at. That is interesting.
I think
how
a
would
lot
you
of it-
make?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna repeat. How would you make like an appealing thumbnail without including the
And quickly,
what
because
is
you're talking about
the-
day one, so you're not talking about somebody who has time to
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna draw this. Like, no,
That's
it's gotta
true.
go. There's people that want the guide now. So like, you're wanting to use images that are either taken from screenshots in game, produced and publicly posted by Square Enix. Like, these are images that are available either in patch notes, in live letters, or with in-game footage. So it's got to be something quick. And like, just a picture of a capital city doesn't do anything. Like, okay, that doesn't tell me anything.
That is true in terms of like thumbnail appealing and how accurate it is.
Because that's what you want. You want it to be accurate.
Yeah.
You want it to describe what the video contains. It can't just be like,
Because
I found a pretty picture of a sunset. It doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah, because I get it. You want to get like the thumbnail is like arguably one of the most important things for like people to click on videos and whatnot. So if it's like you said, a video of a sunset and the content matter is like the darkest son of a gun thing ever, it's really misleading. Like you could do that intentionally if you want to be one of those like horror type things, but that's an unrelated topic. But that is a very interesting problem to have. You could go with a basic, maybe a certain like consistent overlay style. Like instead of showing the names, you can have like a stylistic text, just like stating that this is the boss without like saying the boss name, and just have like guide, like just a guide for like, or day one guide for the first, second, third, fourth, or what, like if it's in a raid, it could be first boss, second boss, third boss, fourth boss, could be one of those.
That helps. Yes, the fact that the community has named things E1, E2, E3 gives us a spoiler-free naming convention that we have set up for ourselves. That like, I'm thinking of running E12S for the first time next week, and I can tell you that, and you're not in that level of content yet, and it tells you nothing. And even if you know what E stands for, it doesn't tell you anything because it's the name of the whole quest line, which are these big, vague names that like make more sense as you go. And so they really don't tell you anything.
What's been really interesting to see overall, like about this conversation specifically, is that as the game has evolved, even Yoshi P and Square Enix's own team has become less and less spoilery with their trailers and what they choose to show as a part of their hype videos, with some rare exception. I remember
when some comments.
Probably. Hey, Yoshi P, calm down. But we've seen even where that like he's let a couple things drop. Like I remember we were at like E3. I'm not going to repeat it in case anybody's not there, but he says something about Shadowbringers, and everybody was like, holy crap. And he's like, I mean, the reason we decided to share that was in the context of the expansion. That's a nothing burger. But for us at the time prior to playing Shadowbringers, it was like, it was so game changing. It was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, so many questions are coming out of my head right now. I remember we posted those videos. It was just so exciting. And then you play Shadowbringers, you're like, oh, he was right. There was so much more to it. I do want to kind of pivot to Furry here, in this case, saying 14 does a better job with the story than WoW does. I can't speak to that, so I'd like to see what you guys, as the WoW players here, say, because my impression is that WoW didn't start like 14 starts with the focus on the story. However, as the expansions have come out, they have started to adopt that strategy. And so I think that is one reason why maybe the culture got set the way that it got set. But I know Chris is a notorious story skipper up until Shadowbringers, and that has changed him forever. But what do you think, Lukron?
World of Warcraft, it does have some really interesting story elements in it. Like if you look and read all the quest text and some of the side quests, some of it can get really freaking dark, and that's kind of cool. But the problem is it's not really emphasized, and all of this stuff can happen, but like what you see on screen is normal gameplay. Like you don't see a whole lot of things happening. Like some quest kill targets they don't even say anything when you like go and finish them off and turn in the quest. But if you look at the quest text, like this could be a whole freaking story arc in and of itself. So the writers and the content of the story is there. It's just the manner it's delivered is what is lacking. And I feel like that's what Final Fantasy 14 does, like in spades, because like A Realm Reborn, is kind of generic in terms of overall like theme and whatnot, but the way it's delivered, it's done very well to where that seemingly generic concept is the reception of it is a lot better because it's given in small chunks, because instead of a giant book to read like right off the get-go when you click when you click on a quest, you got small little segments of it at a time. And that's a lot more easier to consume because when you get the giant wall of text, it's kind of like information overload. It's like, oh, where do I start here?
Yeah.
You know where you start, but it's just like your eyes see all the lines and you kind of like,
That applies to life as
Vanilla
well.
WoW was the worst because you had to go to go skim that big wall of text because the quest objective was nested inside of it.
There were so many people who had no idea where Mancrick's wife was. No idea. I read the quest text and I had to be the guide for.
You
some
had to read
people
the quest text
apparently-
request before it to understand where the battle was that she would have been.
Yes.
Right. And you can't go back to that quest. You would have had to just know.
Yes. So yeah, Vanilla WoW is very much that
They didn't do
true.
that
Yeah. They got a lot easier to handle, and people, you can literally do all the quests in the game without reading a single line. You just click it, follow where the arrow, and look somewhere in the zone. Something sparkly there, you got to click it, and then. It's a lot easier to just get through the game. So it is very friendly for like just speeding through and getting to the end, which is ultimately where WoW focuses on the most, the end part. So it makes sense for them to design it that way. However, I will say their recent expansions, like even all the way back in, I think it was Mist and Pandaria as well, they started getting a lot more in depth with the storytelling. They had some cutscenes in game to go through some of the story, and they got better. They're like, Warlords of Draenor, I feel like that storytelling was pretty solid in there. Like there's some characters I really liked. Too bad they kind of just decided to skip that expansion because that had a lot of potential, despite it had a really weird premise to begin with, because if you deal with time shenanigans in general, that's usually a really bad recipe for disaster storytelling wise. But they had some good elements into there. And then Legion, that like their overall storytelling methods, they just kept improving. And Battle for Azeroth, as much as I don't really care much of the expansion, I will have to say their storytelling methods, they just keep getting better. So they have been getting a little bit better at that. It's just the quality of the story itself, personally.
I love the first 2 weeks of BFA. The first 2 weeks of BFA, the act of leveling up and exploring those zones and doing the quests and doing the side quests, I had a great time. And I think a huge chunk of the community had a great time. It was overwhelmingly positively received in those early months. We all remember it for what it became, but not how it started. It started with a smooth launch, an incredible story, beautiful zones. I was having a blast right up until they told me what Azerite was, and then I was going to have to grind a necklace until it turned into a cloak, and then I was going to have weird rules with the cloak unless I played a lot more. And that's where it got all confusing. And so like the loot systems and things like that were frustrating. But if we're just talking about narrative, they've gotten a lot better at revealing the amount of world building that has happened in World of Warcraft. They can go back and break a lot of their own rules. And so they can go back and frustrate people who have taken the lore very seriously by getting things where it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because each expansion is kind of somewhat designed to stand on its own, as opposed to Final Fantasy's been building this one continuous narrative. So every time they change writers, that writer has to remain respectful because they're in a living, breathing, continuous narrative. And Endwalker is going to be the first time we see that brought to a close, and then we start a new chapter. And so that's the first time that a writer gets to come in and say, finally, blank canvas. I have been operating on whatever these previous guys did this whole time. But I will say, like, people say, oh, WoW's story is worse than 14's. And then people come into 14 and they're like, oh, I'm so shocked people skip the story. 14's story is oddly good for the entire genre. So I don't think it's weird at all that somebody comes in as an MMORPG player, regardless of what MMO they come from, and assume that the story is secondary, because with the exception of 14, that is very rarely something that people pay attention to this degree. And so it is something that sets 14 apart across the board. There's only a handful of other MMOs that have even attempted this level of narrative. Most MMOs, it is a secondary component to help add flavor to the meat and potatoes that is the building of my character, the strengthening of my character, the establishment of this world, a cool combat system, interacting with other players, getting cool loot, all these things that are MMORPGs for the thousands of hours we play. This little fraction that is the time we spend narratively is oftentimes ignored by MMOs. So when we compare WoW and 14, it's like, wow, they're so different. Okay, but if you line up every other MMO, Final Fantasy might be asking for a table for one. Like World of Warcraft is going to have to rent out the whole restaurant. They're not alone in that way. It doesn't make them the weird one. It makes Final Fantasy the odd one out that they've chosen to put this much emphasis on it and that they've done it this well for this long.
So I would like to add, and obviously this is from my limited WoW experience, one of the things I really appreciated about when I was playing it was how much exposition and story was delivered to me in voice acting while I was actually playing and doing something. It doesn't always have to be delivered 100% that way, but I really enjoyed that about the dungeons and usually about the quests themselves, that I was able to get that information. And I think I would have appreciated it more, like my issue being with WoW is like, if I was nostalgic for it, if I had all this, pre-knowledge of it and this investment in it, I think Shadowlands would have been really exciting, way more than it was for me as I played it. But I was like, man, how cool would it be if like 14 was able to adopt more of that? They've brought in some of it with like the trust system in the dungeons, but you only get that if you do that one piece of content. And I find that one piece of content restricting because rarely do I want to just go play the game solo. I would love it even if I was just bringing in Julie and it's like, hey, let's go run through these dungeons and let's get this, get these additional little lore drops, or just have some fun just kind of playing these dungeons by ourselves and leveling up our trust. But 14 doesn't currently offer that as a functionality to the trust system, and I personally would love to see it. But question to you guys, Evans asks, PTR spoilers something that they just hate about WoW. How much of the fact that WoW has a PTR do you feel that impacts the overall story, and why people might not necessarily be so worried about spoilers in WoW as a culture?
So the PTR does not give you full access. It's kind of like a media tour each and every time, but with some bosses. So we are seeing some bosses. So you are seeing some kind of trial type reveals, but you're not doing every single quest. You're not doing all of the Covenant campaigns. It is still limited to a degree. I think that you do run the risk of spoiling things by having any early access whatsoever, but in trade for that, in theory, you're getting feedback. My problem with the PTR at this point is that the PTRs are running so close to the release date of the patch, and they are taking in so little of the feedback from the PTR and making a meaningful announcement as to why they are not making changes that are called for. Because I don't want it to be like, hey, we asked for this, so you have to change it. Like, we asked for this, you didn't change it, but like, if you're not going to change it, you owe an explanation why, because you put out something and asked for player feedback. And so you either need to make those changes so that it's very apparent that you listened, or you need to at least acknowledge that you listened. And instead, it feels like they just give us early access to a portion of the content. We play it, we complain about it, and then we play it live again for the very same problems. And so if you're not going to leverage the player feedback component, then I don't know why you'd reveal any of it early.
I don't do a whole lot of PTR, if I'm going to be honest, so I can't really say a whole lot in terms of this regard, because I tend to stay away from PTR because I kind of heard that reputation about them of not really listening to people. So I was like, why play PTR to begin with when I can just keep progressing my character? But then again, my character's going to reset anyway when the next step comes around. So I guess I lose either way. But in terms of fun, enjoyment, and whatnot, I didn't actually start doing the PTR until, was it Legion? My Legion or BFA? I know I did some in BFA. No, it was just BFA is when I finally started jumping. I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll try and see if I'll get heard. Oh, I got heard. All right. So I play Demonology Warlock, and I main Demonology Warlock in there, and I do that in PvP specifically, and that's kind of a rarity because Demonology Warlocks in PvP are kind of a unicorn because of how many things they got to trip over themselves in order to win. But I really like the fantasy of like a mass army of like minions going at towards things. So I just wanted to see if I can make it work. And I was making it work in the beta as well for BFA. I tested out the Demonology Warlock in the PvP Mugam Bala, the PvP section where everyone was just collaborating and just constantly dueling. I found out Demonology Warlock was really strong. I had like 150 wins and 7 losses for a while in dual win losses because I found out one really, really strong lethal combo. And I was like, yeah, Demonology seems a little overtuned. And literally, I think it was a day before launch, The Demonology Warlock got a flat 25% damage reduction across everything. They nerfed one of the town's Grimoire Felguard by 75%, and they unsynced its cooldown to where it no longer syncs with Tyrant. And having the Tyrant cooldown sync with it, because I had a combo which was Dreadstalker, summon 2 dogs, summon Grimoire Felguard, which immediately summoned another Felguard, which stunned the target, and I would immediately cast into Demonic Tyrant, which leached their health and gave it more damage based on how much health it leached. And while they're stunned in there, I was just free to summon it. And if they trinketed it, I immediately pressed my main pet stun. So now they had no trinket and they had to sit through it. And then while they're getting slammed, I would throw Mortal Coil out, which would have them kind of incapacitated, but feared, but also wasn't broken in damage. And so they'd be stuck there. And I would have my main Felguard use it's a talent. It was a big spinny thing that did 400% extra damage what it usually did. So it basically Beybladed people to death from 100 to 0 in like 4 seconds. So that was what I usually did. And then that got completely nerfed, and Demonology was struggling ever since the very beginning, all the way until Corruptions came around, I think, or at least the patch before that. Yeah, I think it was a patch before that. They started finally coming back around, but I kind of stopped playing WoW for a bit for Final Fantasy 14. Actually, no, that is when I stopped playing WoW. No, I stopped before the Corruptions dropped, and I was like, yeah, Corruption seems a little. They don't feel like a satisfying win anymore because it's RNG for things. But anyway, what are we talking about?
We were talking about the PTR, the effect that it has impacting on spoilers. So that was an interesting. Like, I was like, I don't. We went into like an area of like, I don't know. I've been even see like chat like talking about would a PTR ever come for Final Fantasy 14, and then over on Twitch, which is interesting, just kind of as a thought. Before we get into kind of this final topic that I want to really kind of pose to you guys, I got a special hidden topic for you guys as a post show, just everybody hanging out with us. And also be sure to like that smash button whenever you get the opportunity here on Ginger Gaming Radio. But the thing is that when it comes to spoilers, I think what people are talking about is that people data mine the PTR like crazy because those files get checked in. Chris and I have been vehemently against data mining leaks, and we've seen people get bit just recently. And this is great. I don't want to ruin your experience with the game, the community, but there was a mount that was data mined and was believed to be a part of the game. It ends up being a cash shop mount, and it sent obviously the community kind of in the spiral, namely because there was obviously data mine and assumption. So I see that essentially that things can go really wrong with data mining. You can get excited, and so it's like this weird balance, and you haven't got to experience any of that, and that's actually, I think, a really good thing. But it's one of the things that we see happen more often than not, to the point where it was data mined that we were going to get flying in ARR, or it is assumed that we were going to get that. Chris is like, guys, like if it happens, great. However, don't rest everything on it because it might not be now. It might be later. We see that, and it happens, which was like yay, and then it was like you're an idiot. It's like no, trust me. That is the exception to the rule of people getting mad on the internet for things that they assumed. And that just is something where I would think 14 shouldn't have it. If they ever do, I would recommend, if I was running a studio and I had the ability, PTR would be literally on a streaming, platform. They would team up with GeForce Now or with Stadia.
Well, that's a new technology, right?
As a new technology, meaning that you would never have access to the files, but you could still access the client, test it, etc. But then you wouldn't. But then the question is that would people even really go test it? Because it's like, I think there's probably the bigger testing community is like more interested in trying to gain whatever they can get out of it. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, so we went to the media tour for Shadowbringers, which is the closest I've been to a PTR experience for 14, because that's the closest they let it get. I played on PTRs for WoW for early access to upcoming expansions, as well as for individual patches. And for me, what early access to a game is there to do is to help me make decisions that I can't make without that content. It's not to gorge myself on content that I'm going to now have to re-clear again with less context. So I don't want early access to anything that's story related, because I don't want to do, I already in many games don't like clearing the story once. I don't want to clear it twice. And I definitely don't want to clear it with partial context where I'm like, oh, that's cool. But then that spoils that moment when doing it in the entire game, that moment means so much more because of additional context that was lacking in the early access. So I think you're taking something away from it. And so I don't traditionally like seeing the battle content because I don't really enjoy clearing things and not getting loot so that I can clear them again and get loot. That's one of the problems with RNG style systems, is that it's very frustrating to prog a boss and then not get anything worthwhile and then have to prog that boss again. And so the idea that people would opt into a system that's designed like that from the get-go, I'm glad they're doing it. I don't have any interest. And so what I use early access for is to tell me if I should play a game, or to tell me about things that I'm concerned about. So like for Shadowlands, for example, I hopped into the PTR specifically to test out all the changes they were making to crafting, because they were making some substantial changes because of the way leveling changed. Crafting had to change drastically. And so they were introducing this system called time-worn artifacts, I think what they're called, where you make these artifacts that basically assign an item level to a crafted item, because basically the entire crafting system broke when they changed the way all the expansions are now scaled to your level. And so the expansions don't have to be done in order anymore. So it's weird if the crafting professions are still done in order. And so I wanted to try that system out. And there was all this speculation that there would be like a money making, and then they nerfed it to where it was like a money loss. And I wanted to go take a part in that conversation. While I was at it, I wanted to try out the new player experience because I was fascinated by it. And then I stopped. I didn't go do any open world questing. I didn't see what my class felt like at max level because I don't care, because it's going to be there. And so I trust that people who do have stronger, more well-versed opinions are testing that and offering feedback. They're going to offer better feedback than me anyway. And so that's what I want access to. The media tour, on the other hand, it does all that for me. The story was stripped. There wasn't access to like trial fights. We got to go run like one dungeon.
Yep.
We got to run it with a trust and with other players,
and also not at level cap. Well, the open world we were playing at level cap. The dungeon was like the 0.3 dungeon or whatever. Like meaning,
yeah, they brought us down. We synced. They brought us down
73.
to
Yeah,
and so our level 80 characters naturally kind of sync down, and it just like I got access to exactly what I wanted. I just wanted to see what are the answers to the questions that are concerning people, myself included, and am I still excited about this? And if I am, great, then I'm done. So we only got access to that media tour footage for like 6 or 8 hours. And then we logged off and we were done. That's enough for me. Like I didn't want more time. Sometimes you see content creators, or if you pre-order a game or something like that, you get these like 2 weeks of access and they delete it. I never need that long, because I don't want to put any more time in a PTR or beta state to get deleted than I need to make an informed decision.
Somebody's like, "Are you going to play the New World Open Beta?" It's like, no, I'm pre-ordered. I'm in. I'm ready to play on the 28th, and I don't feel like leveling up just to do that all over again on the 28th. I'm ready, and I'm excited for the 28th for New World, because my character finally is my character. My investment is my investment, and I'm very much looking for that experience. Now, I do want to shift the topic to kind of our final discussion here. Lukron, have you heard of this new 14 streamer, Asmongold, and his buddy Rich?
Oh, I've never heard of them. Never.
They're having a lot of fun last night.
I've never
Rich was
ever heard of them.
I would love to know, because you said, like, especially at the start of the show, like you are on this island of like, invulnerability, like you're just protected. However, I would have to assume that on your island, protected from spoilers in the 14 community, that a bottle with a note that has floated your way, and you have learned that Asmongold and Rich are playing Final Fantasy 14. Do you have any thoughts on that as a former WoW player, as somebody who, I guess, technically paved the way along with like others like Zepla and other content creators? But what's your take?
I honestly think it's pretty neat how happy he seems compared to before. Anytime WoW comes up, it just feels like anyone, when they talk about it, it's just a whole bunch of rage and anger, and I'm like, wow, I feel like I dodged a bullet there, leaving when I did. I just think it's real nice to see them actually enjoying a game, because I feel like it's kind of been a bit of a trend to just be constantly on a hate train, especially with WoW, because I've noticed that it's just been nothing but anger for a while. And it's nice to have them get at least a reset. Like, I know they mentioned that they'll like, or at least some of them mentioned that they'll go back to WoW if it gets better or whatnot, or if Blizzard finally listens or something like that. So I don't know if they'll stay for Final Fantasy 14, but even then, I do believe they'll at least be like clear the content. And from what I've been hearing, people keep mentioning Final Fantasy 14 has bad content droughts, but I've also played Warlords of Draenor, and I'm like, I find that hard to believe. So if there is this so-called like content drought where everyone clears the stuff and they don't have anything to do, to my knowledge, Square Enix supports that, and so that let me step back for a second. Square Enix supports the idea of being able to play other games during that downtime, because as long as they come back, it's about all that matters, because they seem to care about delivering a quality product instead of just trying to appeal to the masses or leech as much money as possible all the freaking time. So I do like that idea, because I know there's a lot of things I would like to play. So considering the pace that I play Final Fantasy 14, don't think I'm going to be getting around to the whole quitting Final Fantasy 14 point, but or at least taking a break from it, because there's a lot in this game. There's a lot to do in Final Fantasy 14. I've been trying for that necromancer thing for so long now. Holy heck. So that by itself is something that could keep me occupied. And I am one of the apparently few unicorns that actually like playing the PvP in this game. So there's that. As long as other people queue it, as long
not
as
right now.
There's
5 minutes.
Yeah, PvP is popping right now. But that's the thing I was going to bring up with is like, I think, and I'm really hopeful for the PvP changes that they talked about, which you probably haven't seen at all. Their new PvP mode or whatever's coming. It's not spoilery, but being that you're on your island and you don't know what's happening.
If I'm going to be honest,
go ahead.
If I'm going to be honest, the only PvP community I remotely am familiar with is the PvP community. I've done 880 front lines on my character right now, and I am in that PvP Discord. I just never talk with anyone. I just watch, look, and see what people. Yeah, I don't really interact. I'm really good at being antisocial, but I have been aware of the whole PvP things and the rumors about things happening in the PvP scene. Some people are saying that Feast will be deleted. I don't think that's like true.
Well, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. If Yoshi P has stated that if the new mode is good and it's like what they want, then yes, like you could see them basically replacing.
You consider it replacing Feast.
Yeah.
Okay.
So but they're going to have to wait to see how it's received. And that my point on the PvP, and I want to jump back to you here in a sec, is that I think when we talk about content droughts, Chili talked about it. It's like really for the hardcore Savage Raider who only does like Savage and Ultimates. Like if you're not, and it's fine. Like Yoshi P says, take a break, and I think that's healthy. I think for me as a player, I'm hopeful that the PvP modes really help foster and feed the PvP community, because I've always gone outside of Final Fantasy 14 for my PvP fix, especially when queue times aren't popping off. But the fact that they are now has me excited to kind of jump back into it, because I enjoy PvP, and I love that the PvP community is growing, and I hope that they get fed in Endwalker. But you were going to make another point, Lucron. Go ahead.
I forgot what the point was.
That's how I do it.
Asmon and Rich.
Oh,
yeah. Rich was doing Ultimate last night, and I will say that it's a reminder. And Asmon's done a fashion show, and like kind of like his mount offs that he's done in WoW. So like as far as content drought, bringing people over who are used to dealing with expansions that literally just didn't release patch content, like Warlords of Draenor had 2 patches, and only one of those had a raid. So like it's people who are used to dealing with content droughts or pieces of content that they don't enjoy. We should see a huge amount of inspiration as far as additional ways to enjoy the drought. We've seen it in the community. We have people who basically sit in content. Ren, for example, has cleared UCOB, I think he said 411 times now. So for people who are looking for that one ultimate clear, that's why he can like talk his way through it backward while he's kind of doing raid call outs, because he's seen that content so many times. People doing minimum item levels, seeing things like Tank Cob, where they're doing 8 tank pulls of UCOB, and they have gotten a clear doing that before. Right now they're working through the Eden Savage series as 8 tanks. So last night they were working on E7. They've already done 1 through 6. So making the Savage clears, like people find ways to make content out of this game. And what I'm excited about with content creators coming in at this size is that it's put additional interest on this collaborative state because you have a large audience around somebody new who is interested in tackling things with veterans. And so you had a party last night that was just stacked with, Mr. Happy and Lamatod and Ren and Momo and Grimlo. And you have this full stacked party where you've got 7 brilliant players, some of which are content creators. I don't think of like Leon as a content creator, but very talented player. You see these people that are talented players, and then you're tossing them in with somebody who's never seen this before. And it results in like really neat content. So what I'm excited about is this kind of collaborative thing that's coming out of it. It's much more sustainable than, I hope their community does well, or I hope existing communities do well. No. One big Final Fantasy XIV community, and like all of this stuff going on simultaneously is really, really exciting to see.
The question to Chris here, do you think YouTube's going to write Asmon that $20 million check and have him jump over from Twitch?
No.
I saw that video and I was like, it's so fascinating when it went like outside of just 14 as a whole, but the shift in Twitch is somewhat like I'm seeing right now as the shift in Final Fantasy and MMOs in general with WoW. The question is will it maintain itself? There's 2 giant experiments going on right now, and it's fascinating to kind of see and hear Asmon talk about that open and honestly.
But they're not just buying one creator, right? They bought a network of creators. And so it wouldn't be Asmon getting a check. They would have to bring over
OTK,
all of OTK
in
one fell swoop. And that check gets really big.
Right. I mean, just $20 million regardless is what he said for himself. And then you have to think about the OTK. What do you think, Lukron? Are you following any of that, the whole Twitch business in and of itself?
Not necessarily. I did read a small bit of it, and I was like, so there's another exodus happening somewhere, I guess. But if I remember right, no, I guess that's a different topic altogether. I was going to mention Ninja moving to Mixer, but
in a way it's similar, but it's like when you look at this one, though, it's kind of where, like, if all of a sudden everybody left WoW and started playing Hello Kitty Island Adventure, and it's like, oh yeah, they're going to be back. Like, it's so different. Where in YouTube gaming's perspective, essentially the debate ends up being YouTube has the people. Mixer didn't have the people. They were trying to buy the people, and people were like, I'm fine here on Twitch. I'm fine here on YouTube. But YouTube doesn't have the tools. They have the technology for the video. And so essentially what Asmon was saying is that how hard is it to build out a good chat? Like, how hard is it to build out the features that are lacking, especially just like what, like, this is a really great parallel to WoW, right? Where WoW relies on people to make add-ons. And then my impression of it is like, I didn't realize how spoiled I was with 14's HUD and different systems, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, it does that. And then I went over to WoW and it's like, you had to download this add-on. And I was like, oh, it's so cool that they let people do this. And then you kind of have this curated, pristine experience within, Final Fantasy XIV. Sure, you might miss out on a little bit of that flexibility, but it does make it easy to just jump on and play the game.
It does.
I don't think these tools are about any one of them being hard. I think Twitch has been building out their chat integrations, their community tools, what a content creator and a viewer experience from 2 separate viewpoints, but with a set of tools that are sometimes shared, sometimes different, for 10 years now. And so there are 10 years of not that hard. And so, my wife and I live in a very old house. Our house is older than my parents. And so, which I'm sure they'd love to be called old. So my dad came over, and he's a contractor for a huge number of years, and then went and worked as kind of on the corporate side, helping like plan out laying cable and stuff for AT&T. So he's worked around like all scales of construction. And he came in and he pointed at all the things wrong with my house, which is a delightful first impression from your parents. You just made the largest purchase of your life. Here's what's wrong. Here's what's wrong. Here's what's wrong. Here's what's wrong. But don't worry. 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, 40 minutes, 30 minutes. All of these are under $20 or $30. No big deal. But he did that for every room in my house. And when you add up all these small changes with, yes, numbers that are $20 and $30 compared to Google's income, it was thousands of dollars and thousands of hours. And so, like, yes, Chat shouldn't be that hard. Emotes shouldn't be that hard. Gifting subs shouldn't be that hard. Finding something for YouTube Premium or partnership or something where you have something to take on the Prime subscriptions shouldn't be hard. Like all these things on their own, each individual feature should be well within Google's capabilities. But they have 10 years of minor tasks to upgrade to their streaming before they can take on Twitch from a tools standpoint.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just something that is like happening right as we speak. Either history is being made or more lessons will be ultimately learned. I think this is kind of round two with essentially somebody who's like a little bit, in Twitch's weight class when it comes to like, okay, what Mixer really was kind of this Hail Mary for, for Microsoft. And then they said, nope, that pass did not connect. And now we're kind of looking at like, is pulling in those communities the right thing? I still think something big is coming to YouTube. YouTube gaming overall. They said like 18 months ago, we're going to be working on all these features. And I think they was originally planned to do a VidCon in October. And so typically that's when some of these like bigger announcements get made. So who knows? That got canceled obviously due to COVID, but maybe they'll still have like, those updates ready to roll out or something to share with the content creator community, because more competition for our time, space, and platform benefits, I think, everybody. The viewer benefits the creator. Maybe not the platform, but the platform hopefully can start to...
They're forced to get better.
They're forced to get
better. It's like a physical trainer, right? You don't like the guy, but you are getting better for it.
You're paying him so you show up.
Twitch and YouTube, they are getting stronger. They are getting more resilient. And as a result of each other, they are spreading the gap between them and any new players like a Mixer coming in and throwing a Hail Mary. They are more Hail Mary proof as a result of each other. So they are becoming better as a result of each other.
Absolutely. All right, Lukron, dude, we're going to do a little special segment that Chad had asked prior to you coming on the show here in the post show. But before we dive into kind of the exit, where can people find you? What do you got that you want to share with the world? The floor is yours.
Well, I play on Ultros on Primal. I'm usually off somewhere in the middle of the forest in a place in Stormblood, gathering crystals, I guess. Half AFK, so if you do whisper me, probably won't respond until probably like 30 minutes later, and I apologize in advance if you do. And just in general, have fun, be nice, be good to each other. No spoilers, don't click links. By the way, the link thing, the scammers are getting smarter, by the way. I still get people doing comments on my whole hacked experience in the past to this day who are still getting fooled by these things because they're adapting. They're making it more believable. Don't click links. Don't click links. Yeah.
All right, Chris, what about you, man? What you got?
Yeah, I'm getting a day off tomorrow, but I will say like Lukron's inspired me to start working on some bigger hitting content. So start taking on a little more time in the editing booth and like take on something a little more effort driven, I guess, for lack of a better term. Not that like sharing what we know about the game and streaming all this time in the week is like not without effort, but I don't know, take on something more, I guess, mature in that way. Like, I don't know the word, but your content quality, I've been thinking about doing it for a long time. We watched one of your videos earlier this week and I was like, I really just need to step it up. Like, you just got to do it. Sitting here thinking about doing it doesn't get it done. So thank you, sir.
That is true. Actually, the longest part of the process is thinking about the creative stuff. So like in my intros and outros, my intro in particular, like the whole playthrough, I can get done and edited in a day. But the intros, I take like 2 or 3 days just thinking about it. And sometimes what I end up thinking, like coming to a conclusion to, I don't like in the end. And that's when it gets super delayed. So the whole hardest part is the creative process, just thinking about the jokes, or if you do jokes or some type of creative content and whatnot. That's the hard part if you ask me. So I do give it, wish you all the best if you do go that route. I just hope you have someone to be able to bounce off ideas from, because that does help a lot with the creative process, because trying to be creative all the time is really difficult.
All right.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Dude, keep up the awesome work. And then those who are watching here on live, stick around. We've got a special segment. If you're listening to MP3 audio of this recording, you can always go to Ginger Gaming Radio and check out what happens before the show and what happens after the show, if you're so inclined. Thanks so much for being here, Lucron. Thank you, Chris. And for Crystal Core Radio, my name's Brian. This has been a podcast among history. This has been one of those legendary shows that you had to be here. I'm hyping it up at the end. That's how we roll here at Ginger Gaming Radio. Thanks for watching it. We love you guys. We'll see you soon. Take care.